Hi everyone watching, this is Eric from It's the DJ, and in this video I'm going to talk to you about all aspects of production and how you put them all together. You put all the ingredients to a pie together, you make a pie. So we're going to put all the ingredients of production together and we're going to make a track. So this is already done. I'm just going to talk about the different elements of the mix and how it all works itself out into a whole track, right? So this tune, I did everything in Maschine. So you know, picking the different sounds and the drums and all that stuff, that part has been done already. And then I fit my arrangement and just made some markers here and brought everything in. So, you know, you shouldn't be surprised when you see that people are using devices that exist outside of Ableton Live, because if you look at how Ableton Live is advertised and sold, you always see people with different synthesizers and drum machines plugged into Ableton. So a lot of people, guitars, etc., a lot of people are capturing their ideas in Ableton. They're not necessarily coming up with their sounds or ideas in Ableton, and I'm kind of in that camp. I happen to use Maschine and external samples for a lot of my production. I don't do the different stuff in Maschine with the drum racks and the sample racks and all that stuff. Matter of fact, I don't even use the session mode, right? So I get my stuff into Maschine and I use Ableton. I use Ableton to finesse the arrangement in the mix, right? So let's talk about the mix. What I like to do is group my kick drum and my bass together so I can mix them together so they sound more cohesive. So at bar 33 is where the bass line starts. I'm going to play you the kick and the bass part soloed. This tune is more chill, relaxed, kind of spacey, hence the very creative name for the tune that I made called Outer Space, and it's 123 beats per minute. So if you look at my kick drum, the kick drum is filling out a lot of the frequencies under 100 hertz. There's a little other secondary ghost note kick there. And the reason I have that little dip at 100 hertz is because a lot of the bass comes in at those frequencies. And there's a lot of bass in there. So if I don't have this EQ or this compressor on, it's like too much. So what I did is I used two tools to carve out space in the mix for the bass so the kick and the bass don't fight with each other. I've done some basic sidechain compression and I've used a glue compressor here. So every time the kick hits, that's going to reduce the bass by a couple decibels. Then what I did is I rolled off a lot of the low end around 60, 70, 68 hertz. That's with it on. And you can hear with it off, there's just a little too much low end going on between the bass line and the kick drum part. So that's that. Next, it happened to be that when I did this in Maschine, I had a hi-hat pattern, a snare, and some other stuff. I just condensed them all to one track. I don't necessarily always do that. It's not the best. You really want to control individually your hi-hat and your snare. It happened to work out in this case. I had the stuff fairly mixed down pretty well in Maschine, and this would be the same kind of thing if you had a Roland drum machine or something like that, or anything of the sort, and you happen to bounce down your snare and hi-hat together and they sound good. You know, you can do that if you want. There's no rules. So that's what ended up happening here. And on this track, what I've done, well, this is actually, so I have New York City compressed this, so it gets a lot of heavy compression. So I'm compressing a lot. See, this glue compressor with the extreme settings does make it sound a little spicier in the mix. And then I've rolled off some of the higher end, which is needed. There's a lot of activity over here that I squashed out a bit by rolling off using a low pass EQ. And then I added a smidge of reverb to this. Now, all these guys, there's other drum parts. They're all being routed to a drum bus. So the drum bus, you'll hear the rides and shaker, the hi-hat and snare. Now on the drum bus, I only gave it very, very subtle compression. It's what I did do to spice things up is I gave it some overdrive. On the pad sound, I didn't want any low end frequencies in the pad to compete with the kick and bass, so that's been rolled off. And then on the keys, just a bit of compression, so to level things out a bit, roll off any unneeded highs or lows, and that's that. All right, so the other thing is, if you notice, all my channels are pretty low. Like, look where the kick and bass, there's a lot of gain, there's a lot of headroom spared, because what you want to do is you want to, if your kick is playing, that's about where your kick should be showing up on the fader. All right, now you want to think about this like it's a DJ mixer. If some amateur producer hands you a track and it's distorted to crap, you can play it for the audience, right? And it's not going to fix things. That's just going to adjust how loud or soft they hear this distorted signal, basically, right? So when you adjust your fader in Ableton, all that's controlling is how loudly or how softly you hear a signal. If it's too hot, what you need to do, I mean, if it's recorded too hot, then obviously that's a problem. But what you don't want to have happen is that your kick is too, or any track for that matter, you can adjust. This is where you want your waveform to be, right? A lot of times you get these sample packs and whatever, and they're just really loud looking, right? So that's going to eat up your headroom and make it hard to master. So you'll have to adjust at the clip level over here, or you just slap the utility plugin on each channel and you adjust the gain accordingly. So like on a DJ mixer, you've got the gain knob. You can use the utility like a gain knob. So that's going to make a signal softer if it likely needs to be before you process it with EQ or anything else. So that's what you want to have happen. You want to have your stuff, you want to spare yourself some headroom before you start inserting plugins and stuff, right? So that's that. So all these channels come up pretty low, and collectively on the master fader, they come up rather low as well. I'm just using a limiter to make it a little louder to mix and whatnot. And here's what's on my master fader. This would not be considered a proper mastering chain. I just let Lander do my rough masters, and then my final masters I send out to a pro. To me, that's a big time saver. So anyway, so putting it all together, so the arrangement, right? A lot of times newer producers make the mistake of doing too much with their tracks all at once, right? So you pretty much can look at a track like this, and you've got, it's like going to dinner. You sit down to dinner, you have an appetizer, you have your main course, and then you have dessert. So this is the appetizer, the first 2 minutes, where I kind of set the tone for things, and I'm not going to introduce any of the main elements until we get more to the middle part. So the middle part is where the keys start. So you don't hear these keys at all until beat 65, which is about 2 minutes into the tune. And I think that's and the vocals kind of hint at things, but you know, notice they're interspersed. What you don't want to do with any of the elements of your tune is overuse this stuff. So if you've been following me and my site for a while, a good way to know when, how, and why you should place different elements in your tune isn't to just reinvent the wheel and slog through it yourself and figure it out. You know, look at what other people have done. If you have a slower tune or something like that that fits this style, you know, maybe you want to model what I've done here. So I've got the keys, and then when the keys come out after 16 bars at bar 81, I've got some drummy stuff that happens, the vocal, and then they come back in. So that's that little breakdown, little drop. Some of the things that I did to keep it interesting is on the vocal gets sent to this delay effect over here with various amounts of delay. So if we look at the automation on the mixer and we look at the amount of signal that gets sent, so there's times when I'm sending a whole lot of signal to this delay, and then what I'm doing on the delay is that there are times when I crank the feedback all the way up as far as it'll go, and what that does is that makes the delay kind of loop and repeat on itself, like over here. You see it keeps going a lot there, whereas on this one, there's not as much at all. It's gonna tail off basically. So I like playing around with delays as a way to kind of give the tune some ear candy and whatnot. The other thing that the vocal part does is if you look at everything. This is a good free plugin, by the way. You can see that when most of the elements are playing that I'm kind of missing some content in the 300 to 400 range. So having this vocal part come in, you know, it fills a gap where, you know, some of the content is lacking, and that's that 300 to 600 hertz range. So that's where something like vocals will fit in the mix and help you fill out your tune. So that's what I have for you in this video. Now, if you're already one of my Underground Elite members, you will get this session for free with all the tracks, and you can analyze, dissect, export, do whatever you want to do with this tune to learn from, because this kind of puts all the pieces together. You've got, you know, your ideas, you've got the arrangement, you've got the mix, and then again, mastering is not something that I burden myself with. I'll just put this through Lander for my demo and like rough mix, car check kind of purposes, and then when it's time to get something sent out that's going to be placed in stores and sold in stores, it's signed by a label, then a pro masters my stuff, but I don't really spend much time with it. But what I do is I will add a compressor on my master fader. I will add the utility plugin to check for stuff in mono. So if you watch that utility on the bottom left of the screen, I just have it go on and off with the letter M for mono. So if I want to listen in mono, I hit the letter M. So, you know, we're getting towards how sophisticated I am as a Ableton Live user. I have done the simple thing like program the on and off button to the letter M on the keyboard. So I try and keep it pretty simple with Ableton, but yeah. So that's how it sounds in mono. I'm compressing a little bit with the UAD Fatso, but we could do a little check with how that sounds versus the native glue compressor. I'm only doing like a gain or two of gain reduction. And then I've got this meter that's free. I'm rolling off some of the very, very lows and the very, very highs with the stock EQ. I'm having it run through the Pultec plugin just for a little extra something that you'll hear. Now this just adds a little something. I'm not boosting or attenuating or doing anything. I'm just running it through the plugin and then the limiter and whatnot. If I wanted to have a rough master, I would just, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I could boost up the gain a bit. But I don't know. I usually just leave that stuff for Lander. So that's it, guys. I mean, the couple UAD plugins here I have on the master are not going to make or break this thing. There's a lot you can look at and learn from with this the way it is. So even without these two guys, with them on, it's just subtle differences. So that's the tune. So basically, if you're currently an Underground Elite member, this will be made for you, available free of charge. If you're not, there'll be a reasonable fee to get this entire template, if you will, track, Ableton session, whatever you want to call it. So thanks for watching. Hope you learned something. And if you like these kinds of tunes and you want access to this stuff, you can get the file for yourself. Thanks. Subscribe, and see you next time.